Let's see what happens if everybody unmutes. Hi. Oh, I see Jan. Hello. Okay, hi Celine, you're in the mountains?
Yeah, I'm in the Himalayas.
That's amazing.
My sister's watching too.
Okay, great. All right.
Good morning, Dave. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can, Linda. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
They're just great. Good to see you.
You too. How's the family?
Family is okay. Family is all right.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you. Yours too?
Yes, so far.
Great.
Good. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
No, of course. Of course. Okay, this is filling up. Okay. Wait, we got two Alexes. We got Justin Walker here, and we got a Richard.
Yeah, Walker here.
Hey, Walker, how are you?
Hi.
Oh. Hello, Richard.
Good morning, David.
Hello, everybody. Okay, hello, Ori, and Gladys and Michael. Okay, Leslie Lembo, are you there?
Good morning.
Yeah. Oh, hi. Hi, Lynn.
Good morning,
How are
Lynn.
you?
Good morning. Good morning to everybody.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, I know a lot of you, but not all of you. So hello to everybody. So let's give it another couple minutes.
Okay.
Is that okay, Sneha?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay.
Dave, is my background dark?
Let me see.
I don't know how to set these lightings.
Yeah, no, let me see.
Should I put another lamp on?
No, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, it's okay, Linda, because this, probably we'll have some questions at the end, but it's okay. It's all right.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, warm greetings to everybody. Thank you so much, Shanti Deva Center and Snehi and Jennifer and everyone for inviting me. So if it's all right with you all, I think we'll do, I'll do some talking about some of the background here, and we'll do a few short meditations that, you could do on your own. But I guess now, if you're not saying anything, and I guess mostly I'm going to be saying stuff, then probably right now it's a good idea to mute yourself so we don't get any background noise, because we have a bunch of folks here. Okay, so what happened here? All of a sudden somebody, who is the host here?
I am.
Snehi, could you make it so that only you can share screen? Because all of a sudden,
I think Victoria is sharing her screen somehow.
Yeah, let's not do that. Okay. Okay, great, thank you. Okay. Okay, and then if you all want to put on your cameras, that's all fine. It's nice for us to see each other. You don't have to if you don't want to. That's fine too. Okay, so hello everybody. Hello, William. Nice to meet you. Okay, so all right. So here today's subject is anxiety. I called this the less anxious Buddhist. That was giving myself the benefit of the doubt. sometimes at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. in the morning, tossing and turning. I wonder if it's really less anxious. I'd like to make this talk as practical as possible. So is it okay we do some of this background and short meditations? Is that okay? Okay. Also, I'll be doing, sponsored by Tibet House, starting Thursdays at 7 o'clock for the next 4 Thursdays, about an hour and a quarter, little talks with meditations also. So, that's, if you want to tune in there, that's fine. Now, how did I come to give this talk about anxiety? Well, it was actually, and can you hear me now? It said I was muted. You can still hear me? Okay. Back in November, December, I was thinking, what should I talk about? Because I give talks in the spring. So I thought to myself, in my usual ready, fire, aim fashion, I thought, well, I've observed over the past few years that a lot of my students at Columbia are, it seems every year more and more anxious in general. And so I thought, yeah, okay, I'll talk about anxiety, fine. And I didn't realize, of course, what a deep ocean I was jumping into. And, but I kind of jump into things like that. That's how I met my wife, Jan, girl in the library. After spending 3 weeks together, I asked her to marry me. So it worked out okay. It worked out all right, which we all find out about during self-quarantine. And then I was sitting wondering what to do my dissertation on, sitting around Bob Thurman at Columbia, and I was a graduate student there. And he said, "What are you going to do your dissertation on?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, you like Tantra, right?" I said, "Yeah." And then Jensine Anderson, who was sitting there, said, "Well, why don't you do the Vajramala?" I said, "Okay." And that was it for like the past, 14 years. So I tend to kind of jump in. And it's kind of remarkable and that I needed to think about the anxiety of my Columbia students to focus on this topic, because actually I've been pretty much anxious my whole life. I hide it pretty well. I have one of those exteriors, seems calm, Buddhist, but people who know me well know what's going on inside. And, and of course I know me well too. So I decided to do it. And then so I thought about it. I talked to some Dharma friends and therapist friends. And they said, "Really? You're going to talk about anxiety? That'll make you more anxious." And yeah, it did. It did. But I think that's okay. It turned out to be okay, because as I turned my mind to the subject and started researching it, thinking it, reading what the Buddha said about anxiety, what the Abhidharma said about anxiety, and looking at the very deep psychological insights that Buddhism shares with us, it became a gift to me. And of course, that's the secret of teaching. If you want to learn, teach. So thank you all again. It doesn't mean it's easy. It wasn't easy at 4 a.m. this morning, etc. But in a way, speaking about anxiety as a person with anxiety does have certain advantages. Who better to talk about incarceration than a prisoner? And who else can talk about conditions in the prison? And also, who has more of an incentive to escape? So I'm always thinking about how I might, tunnel under or escape and get out of this state of mind. And also, when you study something, it gives you a little bit of distance from it, a little bit of objectivity about it. And with fear and anxiety, getting some objectivity and some distance are really helpful. And there is a series of meditations that Thich Nhat Hanh, wonderful Vietnamese Buddhist teacher, has given that I found enormously helpful. And they really do involve in a way, getting some objectivity on one's own feelings, on one's own anxieties. By relating to that anxiety, he talks about as a crying child, and and you comfort your feeling. And by doing that, what happens, at least with me, is you put it outside yourself, and that can be very helpful. And you see, when you do that, that your mindfulness in observing your own mind, as you look at your own mind and feelings you have, your mindfulness actually is not anxious. Your mindfulness is just mindfulness. As they say, it's just mere clarity and awareness. But you see with practice that this mindfulness can be a refuge, as contrasted with, that 4 a.m. feeling where you and your anxiety are just one thing. And I'm speaking from my own personal experience here, because I think to talk about these kinds of things, it's deeply, deeply personal. And I've also found that all of us sharing and talking about these things in itself is helpful. Also, it's personal because, if you're speaking in a teaching role of any kind, it's really, really important that the people who are out there have some insight into who you really are, to what extent you really walk the walk. And in the Buddhist tradition, before there's real teaching that goes on between a teacher and a student, the teacher and the student both scrutinize each other for 12 years, really get to know each other well. And that's, in our culture of instant gratification, that's a long time. But that is just that's a metaphor for there being real communication in any teaching. So anyway, so let's go right to one of these little meditations that Thich Nhat Hanh has, and he has a book called Fear, Getting Through the Storm, which is really great, and this really comes straight from there. But let's do it together, if that's all right. Just a few minutes. We'll do it fairly quickly because I want to go on and cover a lot of territory. But let's do that and then go on. But first, Hanh writes in one of his other books, he says, and he says it better than I can ever say it, so I'll just pass it on to you. When a painful feeling comes up, we often try to suppress it. We don't feel comfortable when our suffering surfaces, and we want to push it back down or cover it up. But as a mindfulness practitioner, we allow the suffering to surface so we can clearly identify it and embrace it. This will bring transformation and relief. The first thing we have to do is accept the mud in ourselves. It's okay. When we recognize and accept our difficult feelings and emotions, we begin to feel more at peace. We see that the mud is something that can help us grow, and we become less afraid of it. When we are suffering, we invite another energy from the depths of our consciousness to come up, the energy of mindfulness. Mindfulness has the capacity to embrace our suffering. It says, "Hello, my dear pain." This is the practice of recognizing suffering. "Hello, my pain. I know you are there, and I will take care of you. You don't need to be afraid." So in our mind consciousness, there are two energies. There's the energy of mindfulness and the energy of suffering. The work of mindfulness is to first recognize and then to embrace the suffering with gentleness and compassion. You make use of your mindful breathing to do this. As you breathe in, you say silently, "Hello, my pain." As you breathe out, you say, "I am here for you." So when suffering comes up, we have to be present for it. We should simply recognize it and embrace it like a mother lovingly embracing a crying baby in her arms. It's such a beautiful thing. The mother has the energy of gentleness and love. When the baby is embraced by the mother, it feels comforted and immediately suffers less, even though the mother doesn't know exactly what the problem is. Just the fact the mother is embracing the baby is enough to help the baby suffer less. We don't need to know where the suffering is coming from. We just need to embrace it, and that already brings some relief. As our suffering begins to calm down, we know we will get through it. So let's do a little bit of this. So first, we'll start with our breath. And I know most of you have experience in meditation, probably more than I have, but bear with me. So, in the tradition, meditation on the breath is called the king of meditations. And so usually we sit, or we could sit in a lotus or half lotus or cross-legged position. For me, even a cross-legged position is tough. And have our backs kind of straight, our body as relaxed as possible. You can either close your eyes or focus on the end of your nose. Your hands can be together in the Buddhist posture like this, or resting comfortably on your knees. But the important thing is to have your concentration on your breath going in and out. And the way I like to do it is I focus on a spot right outside my nostrils, which actually in the tradition is called the Anapana spot. And as I breathe in, we feel our breath go in, and then as we breathe out, we focus on that spot right outside our nostrils and feel our breath going out. And this is a direct passage to the energy of mindfulness. So let's just start, and this will have a number of parts, but let's just start with our breath, focusing on going in and out. Now, this is a practice, of course, you could do for many months in a lifetime, or many lifetimes, deepening your concentration. But we're just getting a taste here. And now, let's focus on breathing all the way in, following the breath all the way from the beginning, and then all the way out. And then you'll notice that at the top of the in-breath, there's a little gap. The bottom of the out-breath, there's a little gap. Stay with it. And now, using the breath, staying with the breath, let's be aware on our in-breath and our out-breath of the state of our bodies. You could scan from top to bottom, or just feel the whole body. As I breathe in, I'm aware of my body. As I breathe out, I'm aware of my body. And now, as we breathe in, we become aware if there's any tension or pain in our body. And as we breathe out, we release that tension and pain. And next, as you breathe in, let's feel joy. The joy like you're really thirsty and you're about to come to an oasis or a cool drink. That anticipating feeling of wonder. So as I breathe in, I feel joy. And as I breathe out, I feel joy. This is watering the positive things in one's mind. You want to water the positive seeds so they grow in the springtime of your mindfulness. And let those other seeds be. And now as we breathe in, let's feel happiness. Let's think of a time or a person or just a feeling that we had when we were just so happy. As we breathe in, let's be there in that happiness. And as we breathe out, could be a loved one, a friend, a parent, something you love to do. In happiness and out happiness. And now, as we breathe in, let's be aware of any painful feelings or fears or anxiety. And as we breathe out, let's calm that painful feeling. As Thich Nhat Hanh was saying, like a mother embracing a crying child. He also talks about when the sun's rays shine on a flower, all of that light penetrates every part of the flower. So you could imagine you breathe in and you're aware of a painful feeling, and you breathe out, you're embracing that painful feeling. It's okay. And the light, the sunlight of your own mindfulness and care for that feeling just penetrate every aspect of it, penetrating any darkness. So as you breathe in now, let's comfort that feeling. And as we breathe out, let's comfort and console that feeling. It's okay, anxiety. I'll give you a hug. Okay, let's come back now. That's just a little summary in a way of a very nice meditation. It's been very helpful to me. So I just have to say a little more. You know, I remember being a kid and being somewhat anxious. I thought there was a wolf in the closet. I always just tell my mother to close the closet door, give a little code to her. I said, CCD, double CD, close the closet door. And I think as I got older, maybe I got a little more anxious. I don't know if you've all had that experience, but you know, through my life, I've done some therapy. I think I could have gone deeper with it. I've tried psychotropic drugs, psychedelic drugs, and I've explored Buddhist practices and meditations for probably half a century now. So in a way, I consider myself to be an anxiety warrior. Maybe some of you have the same experience, and I'm not past it. I'm in it. So if you're in it too, we're in it together. So practice takes time. In the Buddhist tradition, dealing with our human condition, they say takes 3 incalculable eons to reach enlightenment. That's a really, really long time. They say that using esoteric Buddhism, Tantra, it takes 1 or 16 lifetimes, which sounds really fast, but that may be after 3 incalculable eons. So, and His Holiness Dalai Lama says that the results of practice can show up after a while, but maybe it takes years, but they do show up. And speaking of His Holiness, he says that we should all say the Tara mantra for coronavirus, which is a wonderful practice. We won't go into it in depth, but just as long as we're together, let's say it together now a few times and send those good feelings out to all those who are suffering. So let's do this. Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha. Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha. Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha. Now, you know what is anxiety anyway? So in the DSM, maybe some of you are therapists, and I see you're having great people speak coming up, including some therapists and Buddhist practitioners. So that's really wonderful. But according to the DSM, they talk about fear and emotional response to a real or perceived imminent threat. That's important. We need that to survive. Whereas anxiety is anticipation of a future threat. Now, in the 11th century, Alamkakalaśa, the name of one of my cats, who actually, as we speak, is throwing herself against the door, he wrote this. He said, he was writing in Tibetan and Sanskrit, so jigspa, but bracket that. We're talking about fear, anxiety, or terror. Said, is that which, having seen the thing that causes production of fear, stays in the back of one's mind. I think that's a really good description of it, kind of always there. Now, of course, there's a deep relationship between Buddhism and anxiety. Buddhism, of course, itself is a vast ocean of teachings, and anyone who studies these is just amazed at how varied the teachings are. And this may be because Buddha had a very long teaching career. He had his enlightenment experience when he was about 35 or so, and then he taught for another 45 years or so. And so he ended up teaching all kinds of people with all kinds of issues, rich, poor, kings, servants, everyone, Brahmins, untouchables, name it. So because of this, he developed a pedagogy that was really incredible in recognizing exactly what to say to each person. So he taught Brahmins how to be better Brahmins, right? He taught agnostics how to be better agnostics, and mothers who were grieving how to get over that. So because of that, we have the notion of skillful means, which is in the Sanskrit upaya, the most famous sutra is the Lotus Sutra, where Buddha talked about the parable of the burning house, where there's a house on fire and the children are in the house, and the parents want to get the kids out of the house, but the kids just want to play with their toys. So they say, hey, we have amazing toys outside. Come on outside and you can play with them. And the kids all come outside the house and are saved. So because of this, you have so many different practices in Buddhism. So for us, if we're looking at practices to help, we take an exploration into all these practices and we see what works. It's very practical. And of course, as Buddha sat under the tree, anxiety and fear were really a basic thing that he thought about and that he talked about, because we have the Four Noble Truths, of course, that that life as it's ordinarily lived is suffering and stress. And that there's an origin to stress, and that is our craving to hold on to things. But he also taught that there was a way out, and what the way out was in terms of ethics and meditation, and a life lived in pursuit of that. So there's a deep connection between attachment or craving and anxiety. And you could look at it like this. Buddha talked about, he called them the three poisons. He said the basic problem is ignorance, because we tend to think of things as being overdone or underdone, right? Either I'm a self with a capital S, right? I'm David with capital D, here I am. That kind of separates me from all of you. Or I underdo it. I say I'm nothing. I speak. Nobody listens to me. Well, how come when I speak? Do you ever feel this way? I say something, a group of people, it's like I didn't say it, right? So we either overdo things or underdo things. Now the way it's expressed technically is that's about emptiness. Things are empty of being overdone or underdone, right? So what that ignorance, what that fundamental ignorance of overdoing it or underdoing it leads to is either attachment, craving, right? I'm capital D David. Oh, I want myself. I don't want to die. I don't want anything bad to happen. I don't want to lose my loved ones. Or aversion, hatred, anger. Get away from me, right? So ignorance leads to both those two. But you could look at anxiety as being a combination of all three of those, right? You want something. That's attachment or craving. At the same time, you don't want something, right? You don't want to be separated from the thing you're attached to. That's aversion or anger or hatred. And you magnify your sense of self when you're feeling this. That's ignorance. So you magnify your sense of self about the things you want and you don't want. And this is the point of my very favorite sutra. It's always been my favorite sutra for a long time, for as long as I can remember. And it's called the Vajra Sutra, the Fear and Terror Sutra. And now let's take, if it's okay, a little trip through the Fear and Terror Sutra. Right? It happens when Janusonan the Brahmin, who is always giving Buddha a hard time, comes up to Buddha and he says it's not easy to endure isolated forest or wilderness dwellings. Right? It's not easy to maintain seclusion when the monk goes to the forest. It's not easy being alone. The forests, as it were, the jungle, plunders the mind of a monk who has not attained concentration. And Buddha says, wow, that was me in a past life. He says, before my awakening, I was that monk, right? I went out into the forest, into the jungle, and it wasn't easy to be there because what happened, he says, if a twig broke, I thought it might be a tiger, or if something brushed up against me, I thought it might be a snake, and so I got scared, right? And then he says, and in his past life, he thinks to himself, but wait a minute, if you're unpurified in your bodily activities or your activities of speech or your mental activities, unpurified, well then, yeah, you can get scared, but I'm pure in all those. So what do I have to be afraid of? And you go through a whole list of things of, I'm not all about sensual pleasures. I'm not about drowsiness or ill will. I'm not restless and all of those things. And now, of course, and we're reading this and we're thinking, okay, Buddha was out there in the jungle in his past life, and it was really hard for him to be there. He was scared. But then he thought, okay, I have a pure life, so it's okay. But what about us, right? I mean, I think myself, I had a pure life? Yeah, right? No. But there's another story. You know the story of Angulimala? Okay, let me just, bracket this Fear and Terror Sutra. So leave Buddha sitting out there in the jungle, meditating alone for a second. Well, in the Angulimala story in the sutra that describes that, Angulimala was a student at a school, and the other students were jealous of him because he was so smart. And so they told the teacher that Angulimala, even though he was pretty young, he was a young teenager, was fooling around with the teacher's wife. And this really got the teacher angry. And so the teacher decided to tell Angulimala, he said, which wasn't his name at the time. I'll tell you about that in a minute. He said to Angulimala, okay, the way to become enlightened is you have to kill 1,000 people. And being the good student that this young boy was, and loving his teacher and respecting his teacher, he said, okay. And he went about starting to kill people. He became a prolific serial killer. And he got up to 999 people. And then he just has one more to go. And he's up there and he's hiding out and he's looking down on the road. And who does he see walking down the road? It's his own mother. But he doesn't care. He's just all about, I got to become enlightened. And so I'm going to kill my mother. Well, Buddha happens to be there. Buddha knows what's going on through his powers of concentration. And as Angulimala approaches his mother, about to kill his mother, Buddha comes between them and starts doing a little jujitsu. So Angulimala can't get to his mom and he can't get to Buddha either. And eventually Angulimala, and by the way, Angulimala means a mala, which is a rosary of fingers. From each victim, he took a finger. So he had 999 fingers in his necklace. Gross. Anyway, so he says to Buddha, he says, stop. And then Buddha looks at him and says, I have stopped. When are you going to stop? And then Angulimala gets it, becomes a follower of Buddha, becomes a monk. And then, of course, Buddha walks back into town with Angulimala and everybody freaks out. All of a sudden there's the most fearsome serial killer in history in a monk's robes walks into town with Buddha, but it's okay. And he does all right, he repents. So anyway, so if Angulimala can repent and live a good life and then becomes enlightened actually, so can we. So if we're out there in the forest, right, meditating and we're thinking, oh, well, I got a problem. No, it's okay. We just have to stop. Stop craving, stop chasing. And then we too will be in a position like Buddha was, where he can overcome that fear. So Buddha, he's out there, and he says, what I'm going to do, this is in his past life, I'm going to go to the sort of places that are awe-inspiring and make your hair stand on end, such as park shrines, forest shrines, and tree shrines, right? And he says, and while I was staying there, an animal would come, or a peacock would make a twig fall, the wind would rustle on the fallen leaves, and the thought would occur to me, is this the fear and terror coming? Does that sound familiar at all to any of you? Is this the fear and terror coming? Why do I just keep waiting for fear? Let's ask ourselves the same question. Aren't there other states of mind that are preferable to that? I think so. Why do we keep waiting? And he says this, and here's the key to it. He says, I'm reading from the sutra now, what if I, in whatever state when I'm in, when fear and terror come to me, were to subdue that fear and terror in that very state? So when fear and terror came to me while I was walking back and forth, I would not stand or sit or lie down. I would keep walking back and forth until I had subdued that fear and terror, right? And the same if he was sitting or lying down or standing. Keep the same position. Look at it until I had overcome it. In other words, mindfulness. And we go on from here in this same sutra. And so he says, my body was calm and unaroused. I had mindfulness, quite withdrawn from sensuality, withdrawn from unskillful mental qualities. I entered and remained in the first jhana. Jhana, or in Pali, or dhyana in Sanskrit means concentration. And this is actually how Buddha became enlightened. He went to the first jhana, where he had rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. And then, I'm reading from the sutra, with the stilling of directed thoughts and evaluations, I entered and remained in the second jhana, rapture and pleasure born of composure, unification of awareness free from directed thought. This is hard to follow here, but each jhana, each of these is progressively finer and finer. And the fourth jhana is equanimity, right? Equanimity and mindful with the abandoning of pleasure and pain. And in this state, Buddha then, in the night, sitting under the Bodhi tree, remembers all his past lives. Then he becomes aware of the past lives of everyone else when he thinks about it. And then he realizes the Four Noble Truths. This is Buddha's enlightenment. It starts with anxiety. It's founded on anxiety. You have to go to scary places first. And of course, in the Buddhist tradition of meditation, there's a tradition of going to these scary places. Going to, in some traditions, going to meditate in cemeteries, doing scary, scary stuff. But this is all in order to cultivate mindfulness. I remember there's a story about the Tsong Khapa, the great, wonderful teacher in the Dalai Lama's lineage. And he was talking about emptiness, right? Emptiness being Buddhist wisdom, this not overdoing it, not underdoing it. Empty things exist, but the empty of having an intrinsic or inherent existence. Thich Nhat Hanh likes to talk about it in a great way, as usual. He says, we're the wave, but we're also the water, right? We focus on being the wave, but the wave is always changing, and eventually the wave breaks, but we're always the water too. So Tsong Khapa was talking about emptiness, and one of his disciples who was listening got totally freaked out. And the other ones were kind of making fun of him. And Tsong Khapa said, no, he's the only one who really gets it. It's really tough to get, because in a way, and we'll get to this in a few minutes, in a way, this kind of deep wisdom, getting over ourselves in a fundamental way, is scary, because we're letting go of all those things we hold on to. And that holding on, the sutras teach that there's a deep, deep relationship between holding on, be it in terms of craving or attachment, or also in terms of lust. There's a deep connection between that and fear and anxiety. So here Buddha, in the Fear and Dread Sutra, he starts with anxiety, and through overcoming anxiety, that in a way gives him the energy to concentrate, to become enlightened, only for one purpose, to help others, right? He says that at the end of the sutra. He says, why do I do this? I do it because I feel, why do I still go and meditate in scary places? I do this out of feeling sympathy for future generations. In other words, the whole purpose of taking the Buddhist path, we know from studying, it's only to help others, right? If you're all about yourself, nah. But you can be about yourself some, but in order to help others. So it starts, so anxiety is okay. It's okay. Of course, too much can be disabling. That's not okay. But here we have to ask, seeing how Buddha overcame anxiety, is it really too hard for most of us? I mean, in a way, the answer is yes. That's why it takes 3 incalculable eons to become enlightened. Because you remember that in the the sutra, the Avajjana Sutra, the Request Sutra, where Buddha becomes enlightened, and then he's thinking, should I teach? And he says to himself, it's too hard. And then the Brahma, the king of the gods, has to ask him 3 times to teach. And finally, Brahma says to Buddha, well, there may be those with little dust in their eyes who would get it. And it's interesting, I reread the sutra lately. Buddha doesn't say there are those with little dust in their eyes. Brahma says that, and then Buddha says, okay, and then we know he taught. Okay, so the question is, is it too hard? And this brings us to the teaching of the 2 truths in Buddhism. We talk in Buddhism, we talk about these 2 truths, a conventional truth and an ultimate truth. The conventional truth is just the way the world appears to be, how we call it, what we see. To get out of this room, I got to walk through the door. That's the conventional truth. I do have a self. I'm wearing clothes. Yeah, conventional self. Yeah. The ultimate truth is emptiness. This not inherently existing, not being overdone, not being underdone. Another way Thich Nhat Hanh calls about this, and of course I keep coming back to this because it's so important. He says it's not about being, it's about interbeing. It's about interdependence. And actually, they say in the tradition that emptiness, that is being empty of being overdone or underdone, empty of inherently or intrinsically or really existing, is the same as what they call dependent arising, that everything arises dependent on something else. As the millennials say, everything is interdependent, right? So yes, so it's another way of expressing it. So we have these 2 truths, the conventional truth and the ultimate truth. And Nagarjuna, the great Buddhist sage who lived about the 1st century, he wrote in his very wonderful Introduction to the Middle Way, he wrote this: the Buddha's teaching of the Dharma is based on 2 truths, a truth of worldly convention and an ultimate truth. Those who do not understand the distinction drawn between these 2 truths do not understand the Buddha's profound truth. Now, here's the thing. All right, he didn't say here's the thing. Okay, I'm saying here's the thing. Okay, now here's the thing. He goes on and he writes, without a foundation in the conventional truth, the significance of the ultimate cannot be taught. Without understanding the significance of the ultimate, liberation is not achieved. In other words, you got to start with the world we live in. The great yogi and scholar Shantarakshita said that this conventional truth, the world we live in, you would say is beautiful without examination. It just is. Now, if we look at it really closely, it starts to fall apart. Why? Because it's constantly changing, it's impermanent, etc., right? But we start with conventional truth. We have to start with conventional truth. And so part of conventional truth on the way to liberation is dealing with our real world and our and I don't mean real with a capital R, I mean our conventional world and our conventional selves, and that includes anxiety. And in Buddhism, you have a tradition that's very, very, very widespread of the Buddha as a doctor. Buddha is always being pictured as a doctor. And in fact, he said in his simile of the Snake Sutra, he said, all I teach is suffering and the cessation of suffering. That's it. He's a doc. And there's another great sutra called the Instructions Tamalunkhya Sutra, where they talk about somebody who gets shot with an arrow and says, and he goes to the doctor and the doctor treats him, right? Helps him. takes out the arrow, takes out the poison. And he says, like, the man wouldn't say, well, don't take out the arrow, doctor, until I know exactly who shot it, why they shot it, how many stars there are in the sky, what the ultimate truth is of cosmology or the deepest philosophical truth. Just take the arrow out. And this is what Buddha teaches. In other words, help people with real suffering. And some of you, I'm sure you've read Shantideva's wonderful work about the wonderful writings about Buddhism. But Shantideva wrote, he said, and he wrote this in the introduction to the Middle Way, if I'm unable to closely analyze my mind, then I should relax. Isn't that something? So here you talk about a doctor's bag full of medicines, right? We look at how wonderful mindfulness can be in dealing with some of our problems, but you know what? If that doesn't work, Shantideva says you should relax. And many Dharma students, including me, have suffered from anxiety or depression, right? Because especially in our culture, Buddhism, most of us didn't grow up in a Buddhist family, right? Buddhism had something that we needed. So we didn't come to Buddhism because we're necessarily better than anybody else. Maybe it's because we're worse than everybody else. So we needed something. But that being said, I think and maybe some of you think that I should only be able to deal with my anxiety or fear through meditation, right? I shouldn't do anything else. And especially, take psychotropic drugs. Oh no, that's kind of the easy way out. I don't want to do that. Somehow that's un-Buddhist. But now I'll read a little bit from Mark Epstein, who, you all know is a wonderful teacher of these things, also his background in therapy. He wrote an article all the way back in 1993 called Awakening with Prozac. Back then it was all about Prozac. I think that was the first of those psychotropic medications. He writes this: the psychiatric tradition with the most experience in differentiating existential from biological mental illness is probably the Tibetan one, which developed in a culture and society completely immersed in the theory and practice of Buddhism. The Tibetan medical authorities recognize a host of mental illnesses, it turns out, for which they recommend pharmaceutical, not meditative interventions, including many that correspond to Western diagnoses of depression, melancholia, panic, manic depression, and psychosis. Not only do they not always counsel meditation as a first line of treatment, they also recognize that meditation can often make such conditions worse. Indeed, it's well known that meditation itself can provoke a psychiatric condition, an obsessive anxiety state, which is a direct result of trying to force the mind in a rigid and unyielding way to stay on the object of awareness. Treatments for mental illnesses, writes Mark Epstein, are not antithetical to Dharma practice. Rather, the Tibetan teachings seem to say they can be venerated as manifestations of the medicine Buddha himself. So if you're suffering with some of these conditions, and professional counsels medication, it might be something you would try. Or therapy, it's something you could try. There's so many modalities for helping us. Groups, all of these, they're all worth trying, and none of those is inconsistent with the Buddhist tradition. And of course, in the first real practice I learned when I got serious about my Buddhist practice, although I've been doing this for a long time, going all the way back to Chogyam Trungpa when I was like 15, 16 years old. It's a long time ago. when I first got serious about it, you know, maybe 20, 30 years ago, Jamspal, Lozang Jamspal, who's my most wonderful teacher and co-translator, he's just the best. Anyway, so he taught me the Medicine Buddha prayers. And whenever we do a session, which we've been doing weekly now for something like 30 years, we start with Medicine Buddha prayers. And, you know, Jom Den Den De Jin Sheng Pada Jom Ba Yang Dak Pa, and then to the main mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Besaje, Guru Veduriya. Probably some of you have known this and practices this. Om Besaje, Besaje, Maha Besaje, Besaje, Raja Samugata Soha. You know, oh, Medicine Buddha, you know, I venerate you, you know, and when I was diagnosed with cancer many years ago, and I really thought I was going to die, I'm okay. Boy, saying that Medicine Buddha mantra saved my mind. It was really wonderful. So between mantras, His Holiness says for Corona, the Tara mantra, seeing wonderful Tara, Buddha, compassion and power and healing, or the Medicine Buddha, he's lapis lazuli and color, healing. Saying that mantra or other mantras can be very wonderful. And also, of course, these meditations can be enormously helpful as well. But so can a lot of other things. So I would say that there's nothing un-Buddhist about knowing yourself and seeing what helps. And of course, you know, of course, helping each other. Now, there's, in terms of this wisdom, this Buddhist wisdom of you know, looking at our conventional life too, the way things are, and treating anxiety in that context, as well as kind of the ultimate path of really trying to get to the heart of it and really getting out of it, right? There's a sutra called the Arrow, where Buddha says, I'll just summarize it. He says, well, look, an uninstructed and untrained person, when he or she is shot with an arrow, right, feels not one pain, but two, right? Because that person says, when touched with a feeling of pain, physical pain, the uninstructed run-of-the-mill person sorrows, grieves, and laments, beats his breast, becomes distraught. So he feels two pains, physical and mental, right? Think about it. You know, so often when we have one pain, we lay on top of it anxiety about it, right? But Buddha is saying the person who's really trained in mindfulness and instructed, they just feel the one pain. Wouldn't it be great just to feel one pain instead of two pains, right? In fact, you know, when I was laying there at 4 a.m. this morning, because you know, even though I've done this for so many years, and I used to be a lawyer too, I used to go to court and speak. Doesn't matter. Before I speak, I just get really anxious. And then you get anxious about being anxious. So you got the 2 arrows there. And then I can even get 3 arrows. I can be anxious about feeling anxious about feeling anxious. And then with a philosophical mind, you know, man, it can be bad, as Jan knows. Okay, so we have to deal with these things in the context of our real lives. And Shantideva gives some really interesting advice about this, about what he calls the crazed elephant of your mind. And in his guide to the Bodhisattva's way, it's in chapter 5, I'll read you a few things. It's short. He says, with the utmost effort, I should check to see that the crazed element of my mind is not wandering off, but is bound to the great pillar of thinking about Dharma. Those who strive by all means for concentration should not wander off even for a moment by thinking, how is my mind behaving? They should closely analyze their mind. And then he says what I read before, but if I am unable to do this when afraid or involved in celebration, then I should just relax. I mean, the guy really had a sense of humor too, as well as being very compassionate. He goes on, he says, whenever I have impatience, laziness, cowardice, shamelessness, or desire to talk nonsense, oh yeah, if thoughts of partiality arise, at these times too, I should remain like a block of wood. I should remain like a block of wood. And when I asked Jamspal the other night, I said, I'm giving these talks, what do you think I should tell the people? And that's what he said. He said, be like a block of wood. So let's now go back to our breath meditation. And just for a minute or two, look, obviously these are practices, this practice should go on retreat for like 3 or 4 months. And in the practice of the jhanas, which I mentioned before, which is very big in the Southeast Asian practice, in the Theravadan practice. So wonderful. And there's a great book called Practicing the Jhanas. And one of my ambitions, maybe not in this life, I don't know, but certainly in my next life, will be to practice those jhanas, which is basically you practice on this anapana spot. As your breath goes in, your breath goes out, until you really, really get concentration. And then you go into those jhanas, the 4 that I described, and then the jhanas of the formless realms, which are infinite space, infinite consciousness, infinite nothingness, and beyond perception and non-perception, which are actually realms you only get to through meditation. And then Buddha actually, in his path to enlightenment, they say, went through the 4 jhanas I read, and then the 4 formless realms that came back to that 4th jhana and then became enlightened. Anyway, so let's, but I digress. But let's see, that's the wild elephant of the mind. Just ran off for a second. Come back. So let's see if we can, just by focusing on our breath and this spot here, right outside our nostrils, let's spend a minute being blocks of wood. Let's see how that feels. Let's go there for a minute now. Okay, blocks of wood, come on back. Being a block of wood, being in that state of merger, of concentration, would be wonderful. Because in that state, you're not experiencing those other states that are troublesome. This again is the wonderful power of mindfulness. Now, so in this kind of conventional approach, we have a big toolkit to work with, and I've just I mean, this is just a small selection of some approaches. Tradition has many, many more. And there's a lot of great stuff now, all kinds of meditations now, especially with people staying at home. There were a lot before, there are a lot now, and very, very wonderful. I'll probably tune into one of Thich Nhat Hanh's later today. But now let's talk about this, this ultimate way of dealing with pain, suffering, anxiety, which is really getting rid of it. Which, although it's hard, that's what Buddha did. That's not to say that by going on this path, you're not going to help yourself and others tremendously, even if you don't get to the goal in this lifetime. So I'd like to just read to you a very short sutra called Subrahma's problem, which really gets to the heart of the whole thing. And in it, a young god named Subrahma appears before Buddha. And he says this, just 4 lines. Always anxious is this mind. The mind is always agitated about problems present and future. Please tell me the release from fear. And Buddha doesn't pull any punches. Buddha says, not apart from awakening and austerity, not apart from sense restraint, not apart from relinquishing all, do I see any safety for living beings. I'll read it again. Not apart from awakening and austerity, and by austerity he means that energy and concentration. Not apart from sense restraint, and that means not chasing after everything you see, everything you touch, everything you think about, not craving it. Not apart from relinquishing all, do I see any safety for living beings. And the wonderful monk Bhikkhu Bodhi, who has translated so many sutras and is another wonderful, 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 wonderful teacher. He translated this Subrahma Sutra, and he writes, and he has a little commentary about it, which I think is also in the handout. Let me read you his paragraph that Bhikkhu Bodhi writes about this. He says, the relinquishment of clinging cannot come about through the forcible rejection of what we love and cherish. It arises, get that, not from forcible rejection of what we love and cherish, no. It arises from wisdom, from insight, from awakening, from breaking through the dark sleep of ignorance. The sovereign remedy is to see that right now, at this very moment, there is nothing we can truly claim as ours, for in reality, all this is empty of self and what belongs to self. Form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness, all are to be given up by seeing them as they really are, as not mine, not I, not myself. To see the truth that all conditioned things are impermanent, disintegrating, and bound to perish is to turn away from clinging, to relinquish all. And to relinquish all is to find ourselves not barren and empty-handed, but rich with the wealth of the noble ones. For one without clinging, there is no fear, no tremor or agitation, no dark winds of anxiety. The one without clinging is fearless, faces no danger from any quarter. Though dwelling in the midst of aging, sickness, and death, he has reached or she has reached what lies beyond aging, sickness, and death. Though the leaves fall and world systems shimmer, he sees security everywhere. So give it up. Give up all those things that we're clinging to, that we chase after. Now, I've spoken a little bit about the jhanas, and we've read from some sutras, but there's also really the Buddhist science of mind, the Abhidharma, which is one of the three, they call them baskets of Buddhist teachings, being the sutras, what was spoken by Buddha, the Abhidharma, what was analyzed by scholars and meditators after Buddha from Buddha's teachings in terms of real science of everything that exists and of all psychological states. And the Vinaya, the third basket, the rules of discipline for monks. And in the Abhidharma, it's really quite amazing. There's so many factors and combinations of factors, so you can see that what we call anxiety can be in combination with different factors, so you can actually get a diagnosis from this. And one of my again, maybe not this life, maybe this life, but certainly the next one would be a study of the Vishuddhimagga, the path of purification, written in the 4th or 5th century by Buddhaghosa, who lived in Ceylon, which is the remarkable text on meditation and Abhidharma, on the science of mind. And one of the things which I always have my students at Columbia read is he has an exact description of how to remember your prior lives. It's really quite remarkable. It tells you exactly how to do it. Doesn't mean you can just go do it. So, but in the Abhidharma, there are 5 hindrances to these states of jhana, which are the states that Buddha was in, leading to his enlightenment and leading to his escape from all anxiety, right? Our goal here. And the 4th of these hindrances to jhana, the hindrances, by the way, it's desire for the senses, ill will, sloth and torpor, that is if you fall asleep when you're meditating. And the 4th one is called restlessness and worry. And the last one is doubt. But restlessness and worry really is this kind of anxiety. And interestingly, the prevention or cure that the Abhidharma teaches for restlessness and worried, which actually is described as the effect is one of floating. It's described in the Abhidharma. Ever feel that kind of floating feeling when you're anxious? I know I have. But the remedy is letting go of or disowning suffering. And so let's now go to another one of these wonderful Thich Nhat Hanh meditations, which is a little more cosmic than the first one. I would say it's on the ultimate level. And I love it very much. It's been very helpful to me. But let's go on a little journey with this and see if we can just get a little taste of what this kind of ultimate release from anxiety might be. So first, let's, as always, ground ourselves in our breathing. Focusing on the breath. Just the breath. I breathe in, I breathe out. And now let's water those positive seeds in our minds by making our mind happy with each inhalation and exhalation. It's mouth yoga. You can smile when you're doing this. Think about something you're really happy and smile. Smiling itself definitely makes your mind happy. And now, having watered those seeds, let's be aware of any painful feelings and calm them like we did last time. Hello, painful feeling. I'm going to hold you like you're a crying child. I'm going to shine my rays of light right through you, oh painful feeling, making you feel better. And now, breathing in, I concentrate my mind. Breathing out, I concentrate my mind. Just like sunlight that's focused by a lens can burn a piece of paper. The mind, when concentrated, is like a laser beam. And let's, as we breathe in, have that concentration. And as we breathe out with that laser concentration, and let's focus that laser beam on emptiness, on interbeing, on how things exist, not being overdone or underdone, not with a capital letter S, self. They just exist conventionally. They inter-exist, no barrier between us and anything else. Chain of causation of impermanent things. Let's laser beam focus with our in-breath and out-breath on that emptiness of inherent existence, on that interbeing, on that connection. There's a wave, yes, but there's water too. And now, having concentrated deeply on emptiness, now when we breathe in, let's think, I liberate my mind. And when we breathe out, I liberate my mind, just like the match which lights the flame is then burnt up by the fire. This power of concentration that we've lit is liberating our minds. As I breathe in, I liberate my mind. As I breathe out, I liberate my mind. Now, as I breathe in, I observe deeply the impermanent nature of everything. And as I breathe out, I observe the impermanent nature of all things. And we can focus on one thing, but deeply seeing how it's impermanent. Our bodies are constantly changing. Everything is constantly changing. Everything changing and impermanent, nothing to hold on to. It's okay, but that's the way it is. Let's look deeply at it, not just intellectually, but with our whole concentration. And now, seeing that everything is impermanent and that anything we look at, we think about is impermanent. As we breathe in, we observe the disappearance of craving desire. And as we breathe out, the disappearance of craving desire. There's nothing to hold on to, so that grasping just disappears as we breathe in and we breathe out. Now, as we breathe in, let's observe cessation, the ceasing of grasping desire or pushing things away. Cessation is a synonym for nirvana, like a candle going out, candle of grasping. Let's breathe in and observe the cessation, and breathe out. Same. Now, let's let go. So we breathe in, we let go. And as we breathe out, we let go. Let it go. Okay, let's come back from our little taste, a little taste of nirvana, of ultimately what it might be like to let go of our desiring, grasping, attachment, and all the anxiety that springs from that. So that's maybe a little taste of ultimately how we get out of these feelings of fear or anxiety. Now, in Buddhahood, though, Tsong Khapa teaches that the two truths, conventional and ultimate, are one. And actually, you don't have to be enlightened to think about this. We talk in Buddhism about wisdom and compassion inseparable. Wisdom and compassion inseparable. And why? I mean, why is that? The wisdom, of course, is this wisdom of emptiness, things not being overdone or underdone. And if I'm not overdone with a capital D, David, separating myself from all of you, and I'm just a little d, David, we can hang out. We can have some fun together. I'm over myself. And that wisdom naturally gives birth to compassion. Why? Because if you're seeing things as being not overdone, as not having a real self, an inherent existence, then you see your connection to everything and everyone else. And naturally, you feel compassion. You can start the other way too. You can just say, let me just love everyone. If I'm loving everyone, then I'm over myself when I'm loving somebody else. And that is Buddhist wisdom. You're over yourself. So really, this wisdom of seeing reality, seeing both the wave and the water, this wisdom of interbeing is really the same thing as compassion. And Shantideva, in his, guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, and this is the Dalai Lama's favorite quote too. But I'll read the last four. Well, it's not the last four verses, but in the 10th chapter of the Bodhisattva's way of life, Shantideva wrote, "May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting one another. May no living creature ever suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, or their minds ever be depressed. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. May the pains of living creatures ripen upon myself, and through the might of the Bodhisattva Sangha, may all beings experience happiness." So right now, we have a little bit of a Bodhisattva Sangha here. And you at Shantideva Center have a wonderful Sangha all the time. And we all have little Sangha. Sangha is a group of like-minded people, of practitioners. And of course, in these times, we're all doing what we can to help each other, help those who are sick, to help those who are jobless. So we'll do that. And there's another. So this compassion is really key. And in a minute or two, we'll kind of end up with a meditation, really starting with that and going there. But there's, before I get there though, there's another thing that's really important in the Buddhist tradition, particularly the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. You guys know about Guru Yoga, right? Guru Yoga. In the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism, normally when you go for refuge, which is like what Buddhists say, I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go to refuge to the Dharma, I go to refuge to the Sangha. Well, the Tibetans, they have a fourth one, but the fourth one becomes the first one. The first thing they say is, I go to refuge I go for refuge to the guru, to the Lama, and then Buddha, and then Dharma, and then Sangha. And that's because the Tibetans recognize that, I mean, Buddha was great, no doubt about it, but your teacher is the one who's really there for you, right? Now, honestly, I always had a problem with this. And, you see sometimes people abuse that kind of role of a guru. We've seen it throughout history, and we've seen it lately too. And I mentioned at the beginning that really the medicine for this is really getting to know your guru well, right? I never really, I tend to be kind of iconoclastic and kind of egocentric and kind of breaking the rules. And so this whole guru yoga thing, I couldn't really get with. But then something happened. Years ago, I had something wrong with me. I forget what it was, but I had to go get an MRI. Any of you ever had an MRI? Okay, so, okay, an MRI, when I went years ago, they put you in this thing, it's like a coffin. They strap you down basically, and they shoot you into this tiny little space with this huge metal thing around you, the magnetic resonance, imaginator, whatever it is. And so when it happened to me the first time, I totally freaked out. I thought I was really going to die in there. I thought I was going to heart attack and die. But somehow I got through it. Don't ask me how. Okay. Then years later, it wasn't that, it was only about 2 years later. It was only about 2 years ago. I had to get another MRI. And so, but I thought to myself, they can't have that coffin thing anymore. No way. They have to have some other technology, open. And so I went there, and guess what? The coffin again. So they put me in there. And even, here I am, I practice now Buddhism for like 48 years, whatever. I freak out. And I say to the tech through the microphone, I say, get me out of here. And he says, well, why don't you relax, I say, no, get me out of here. And then he gets me out, and then he starts to sweet talk me. He's had experience in this. He starts to sweet talk me like to getting back in the, in the machine. Won't work. Then I thought to myself, what would Jamspal's mind be like? Jamspal's my teacher. We've been translating together for now 25, 30 years. What would Jamspal's mind be like? And I say to the tech, put me back in, and I'm fine. This was really my first real experience of Guru Yoga after so many years. Now, and what a wonderful way it was to experience his mind. I mean, that's real teaching. Now, those of you who aren't so troublesome as me, maybe you can come to it more easily. But faith in a wonderful teacher is a wonderful way to have her mind or his mind come into your mind. And that's how you directly learn, and how you can really get a transmission of these wonderful Buddhist teachings. So that having been said, let's finish up with another little meditation, which is in which we'll do the practice of Tonglen, which many of you are familiar with. Tonglen means sending and taking. And what we're going to send to everybody is everything good, the light of health, wisdom, happiness. What we're going to take from them, in only as much of a dose as we're comfortable, is their suffering and anxiety and darkness and ill health. Okay? Only take as much as you want. And if you don't want to take any, that's fine too, because remember, we all got to be where we are. Then let's just take our own sunlight and shine it on our own suffering. That's okay too. So let's do like Spock in Star Trek, like my thoughts to your thoughts. But let's close our eyes now. This is a real visualization, and let's did you guys hear that, by the way? Yeah, okay. Sorry. Let's close our eyes and let's imagine that we're in a beautiful valley in the Himalayas. Mountains, green, it's the spring, there's a bright sun, there's majestic clouds, birds tweeting, not that kind of tweet, real bird tweets. And imagine an island in the middle of a crystal blue lake. We're on the island, and on the island there's gods and goddesses and people, animals, beautiful plants, cars all decorated with art. It's like Burning Man, dragons. And in the middle, there's a giant tree made of jewels and wood and leaves. And on top of that is a throne held up by lions. And on top of the throne, imagine sitting the most enlightened being you know or you could imagine. Could be Buddha, could be His Holiness the Dalai Lama, could be Jesus, Mother Teresa, could be your mom or grandma or imam or rabbi, or it could be the best qualities of all of those, or your best friend or your boyfriend or girlfriend. Just imagine this wonderful person embodying all the best qualities of enlightenment and compassion. And imagine that they're also surrounded in the sky by all kinds of other wonderful beings from the past, present, and future. And they're all looking at you and smiling. They're your teacher. They're there to take care of you. And imagine that from your mentor's and nectar, golden, bright nectar, descends from their heart right down through the crown of your head and goes right into your heart, driving out all the shadows of anxiety and confusion, the golden nectar bringing joy, clarity, and happiness and warmth. And your mentor looks at you again with this radiant smile, and the light comes down and it brings into your mind and your body bliss and happiness. You feel the nectars, you feel your own infinite potential. And Buddha or Jesus or Moses or your best friend looks at you, your teacher looks at you and smiles, and she is so happy that this is happening. And then you breathe the nectar coming down through your crown into your heart. You breathe it out, you breathe it in, comes down into your heart, and you breathe it out through your heart. Your light shines everywhere. And then you look around you and you see everyone is around you. All the people you love, they're sitting to your left. People that you don't know, lots of them, or you just feel neutral toward, are in the center. And the people who annoy you or to your right, and they're all in this sacred space on this island in the Himalayas in your mind. This beautiful place that is always in your mind. All the beings are there. And with this nectar flowing down from your mentor into your heart, in your mind, you realize there's no barrier between you and all the beings. And animals too, interstellar beings too, everyone, all realms of existence, there's no barrier. You're all the same, you're all connected, you breathe the same air, you drink the same water. You have tendrils, tentacles of bliss going from your heart to all of those beings, to all of their heart. The world is perfect. You're separate, but you're completely connected. Your separateness is just like a dream, that's all. And this actually is emptiness. This is compassion and wisdom inseparable, your connection, the light of clarity and awareness, the brilliance and the happiness. And you feel their suffering too. And you want to make them happy, and you can do it now. And what we're going to do is we're going to prepare ourselves a little. We're going to imagine that in our heart there's a little disc, and on the disc is the mantra of Manjushri, the Bodhisattva or Buddha of wisdom, Manjushri. He's usually pictured with a scripture in one hand and a sword to cut through ignorance in the other, with a smile. And his mantra is Om Arapadzana Di. The D is in the middle of this disc in your heart. And the Om starts at the top, 6 syllables, Om Arapadzana, and then D. And we imagine that it's just going around and around. Om Arapadzana Di, Om Arapadzana Di, Om Arapadzana Di, Om Arapadzana Di, Om Arapadzana Di. In your heart, the spokes of that mantra just cut through any ignorance, and the light nectar is coming from your mentor. There's no problem in your heart and mind now. And feeling the suffering of others now. As you breathe in, that suffering comes into that mantra in your heart that is full of light and nectar flowing from your mentor, from Manjushri. And then you breathe out radiant light, no darkness, happiness and health to all of those beings. So you take in their suffering, their anxiety, and you breathe out this unlimited light and nectar to them. In, you take, out, you give. Let's do that for a minute. And now, as with any contemplative practice, we quit while we're ahead, and let's end by thinking that our mentor is so happy that we've meditated like this. They melt into light and they flow down through our crowns into us, and they take up residence in our heart forever. But we don't hog them. We dissolve ourselves into light, and we flow into all those beings, into their heart. And we dedicate any merit from this meditation to all of them and to our becoming Buddhas, so we can really help them even more. And then we just disappear. We come back into our normal identities. And now we're back. And we have our mentor still in our heart, and we have that light and that nectar and that awareness and that wisdom and compassion that are inseparable, and this powers us. And now we think, let's do what we can to help everyone out there, each other and everyone out there in whatever way we can. And let's end on this note here. And I want to thank you all for inviting me. It's been such an honor and a privilege to be with you. And let's again dedicate all the good things from our time together to all those suffering with disease now, and those, let's remember those who are helping them, all the doctors and nurses and everyone else. And please, everyone, let's stay positive and optimistic. And let's remember that we always have our mindfulness, and that our breath in and out, as we did, is a golden road to peacefulness and calm. And it's a refuge that's always with us. And take your medicine if you need it. Let's do what we can to do to help others. And let's stay healthy and happy. So, thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Much love to everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. Happy to, happy to correspond with anybody, et cetera, whatever. And it's been really wonderful being with you. Look, we do have a couple minutes if anybody has a question or a comment. That's really okay.
Thank you, David. So good to see you in wonderful meditations.
Okay.
Thank you so much from my heart.
Good to see you, Leo. Okay, so that's it. Let's go forth positive and healthily. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, David, so much.
Great to see everybody. Thank you so
You
much.
too. Thank you. Lift my spirit.
Great. Mine
Okay.
too. Thank you all.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow, John Carlin, hello.
Yes. Yeah. And
Hey, Richie. All right, great to see everybody. Let's all be in touch.
video. Oh,
Okay.
oh. No.
Hi, Jan Jan. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
What was that sutra?
Which one?
Which one?
No, it was the interpretation, the commentary.
Oh, but Bhikkhu Bodhi's commentary to the Subrahma.
Yes.
If you go to Access to Insight, and you look up Subrahma, Subrahma, you'll see that in Bhikkhu Bodhi. He's so amazing. You know, he teaches in Carmel in Westchester at that big monastery there.
Oh,
Yeah, he's really amazing. Yeah,
thank you so much.
sure.
That's fine. Okay.
Mhm.
Boop, boop. Boom.
Thanks, Nehi. Good to
Thank
see you.
you.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. I'll end the meeting.
Okay.